Does the content you create for your podcast have character? I've seen time and time again that the podcasts that allow the host's character to shine through are the ones that grow the fastest and have the most loyal following. That's why I'm joined by Emily Aborn in this episode to find out how we can inject more character into our podcast. And in this episode, we'll cover what exactly is podcast content and how to make your podcast stand out. How to repurpose content in a way that attracts more of your ideal listeners without taking all your time up. How to use AI in a way that doesn't suck the life out of your content. Exercises that you can start doing today to help you inject more character into your podcast, and much more. If you want to attract more loyal listeners to your show and stand out from the crowd, then this episode is for you. Emily Aborn, thank you for joining me on Podcasting Amplified.
Thanks for having me, Joe. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, you host content with character, but just for a little bit of context, I know the word content is used a lot for all sorts of different types of forms of media on the internet. Can you just explain to people what exactly we mean when we're talking about content, please?
Sure. And I love defining it for people because I think we do toss all these terms around on the internet all the time, especially in like the digital marketing and entrepreneurial world. And we don't take a minute to stop and think about what they actually mean. So I like to, content is really anything that is sort of putting your message out there. So it could be your website has content on it. For example, you may have blogs on your website. A podcast is an example of content. Your LinkedIn posts, your social posts, like all of that is technically video content, is all content. But I actually like to think of it in a more like human perspective. We're just creating for creating's sake, right? We're just like generating stuff to generate stuff. So I like to remember that content is actually a bridge. So it creates a connection between you, the business owner or the podcaster or the person on the other side, to the clients that you want to work with and the people that you want to reach. So it's any way that you're like kind of communicate to them your message and also listening to them, because it's a two-way thing, right? So I like to think of content being the bridge. Content is the way you can learn who I am, what I do, how I do it, but also you know that I'm here to listen and help you specifically solve your problems.
It's a bridge. I like that. And if that's content, then what is content with character as opposed to, I guess, characterless content?
Well, I mean, it's funny because AI was not even really a thing when I came up with the name for my podcast, Content with Character. What I was seeing was just that people were like really hesitant to put their actual personality into their content. So they might like create something that was like very educational or very factual or informational, but it was lacking that like kind of like human feeling to it. And that was like even before AI came along. So I started my podcast sort of with that, like what is the real meaning and essence of being a human, and how can I have that come through in my business? Like that's the only thing that really like sets us apart as podcasters. As you know, it's not like we all have some genius new idea or like some genius new product or service or offering. We're just kind of rinsing and repeating the same sorts of things. So the one thing that we all have, that I have, that sets me apart is like the character of who I am, which is like my personality, my values, my mission, like you know, who I'm drawn to, like all of these pieces of myself. So that was sort of like why I created the podcast and called it Content with Character. But then AI came on the scene and started really showing me just how important it is to have that human element in our content. Like, I don't know about you, but I'm still pretty able to see when AI created something versus the person on the other side. In fact, somebody filled out one of my questionnaires recently, and it happens to be somebody that I know. And she put at the bottom, I had my custom Chat GPT fill in the answers for me. And it's funny because even before she had told me that, I was like, this actually doesn't sound like my friend. This does not sound like the person I know. And so when I got to the bottom and I saw that confirmation, I was proud of myself, first of all, for like being able to notice it. And I think we all have that capability. But I also it like really cemented my belief that it is so important to have that human piece, that character, which unfortunately, AI does not have that. They don't have the benefit yet of being a human and having an experience in the world.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought the AI thing up, because looking into your podcast sort of over the last couple of weeks, it did make me think, like, I wouldn't be surprised if this podcast had have been launched last year in response to AI, because it seems so perfectly timed. But obviously you've been doing it for a couple of years now. And yeah, I mean, I know exactly what you mean. I can tell, or at least I like to think I can, like when someone's written something in AI, you see it all over LinkedIn in the posts. I can tell who's posting, like replying to my content, where if they're using like an AI tool to do it. And it's just like a really generic response. And there are obviously like more sort of grammatical tells. We don't have to get too deep into that, but what does it look like sort of in practice if sort of two people came to you to maybe critique their content, and one person was doing everything right and it was content with character, and then the other person, you could tell that they were holding back and not putting that character into it? What would that look like if it was a piece of video content or written content?
So some of the things I encourage people to think about are not just who their client is and who their customer is, but really who they are. Meaning, like, one of the activities I'll give my clients is, what does your spouse or partner say about you? What do your very best friends say about you? What do your kids say about you? What does your family say about you? And then what are like 5 adjectives that you would say about you? Because I think that gives you not saying that you should base who you are on what like other people see you as, but that allows you to really think about like this full spectrum of who you are and the different ways that you show up. So for example, my husband might see me being a little bit more intense around the house, or like a little bit more structured than some of my friends are going to see. But that is like a huge part of me, is that I'm like very structured and very organized, which actually plays a role in being a benefit to my clients and the way that I kind of like map out my whole content and my content for my clients and things like that. So my point is thinking about yourself in that bigger picture. And some of it is even like, some of the things I will ask my clients are like, what patterns do you like? What colors do you like? What are your hobbies? What do you like to do for fun? Like, just thinking of those things that are pieces of your human side can let you express them a little bit more. And then, because I don't think we have to like choose all of our most vulnerable pieces to share on the internet. I'm not like that person, but choose like 5 things about your personal life, about your day to day, that feel good to you to like kind of associate with your business. So I'll give you an example. Like, I am a big reader, so I will almost always include like books or the thing that I'm reading as a piece of like who I am, and it also relates to my business. So you can kind of, my dog, for example, like he doesn't really have anything to do with my business, but we go for these long walks and I get a lot of creative ideas on my walks. So thinking of those things that tie into who you are and your comfort level in like sharing them and tying them together with your business, I think can really help you to have more of that character. Now, when you ask me like, what would I say somebody's doing it like 100% perfectly? I also don't think that there really is a perfect, and that's kind of the point. Like, you're not going to be able to show up perfectly, but I actually think that's probably better for you. There's research that shows, so you and I were talking in the quote unquote green room, and you were saying like you edit out people's ums and ahs, which I love that, like when we're in this kind of interview, because people want the information quick and fast and they don't want my brain fart delays and things like that. There's actually research that shows that when a human inserts those kinds of things like and and whatever the case may be, it helps to humanize them with the audience and make them more relatable. But it also has like these powerful subconscious cues that let people know sort of what is coming next. So I think of like character and putting that stuff into our content a little bit like that. Like your imperfections are actually probably giving some really valuable information to people on the other side. So I don't think that everything should be like perfectly tailored and curated and, every single sentence needs to be exactly grammatically correct. I'm not saying make typos, but choose those conversational elements on purpose, and it can go a long, long way for you.
And obviously there's the audio side of things. Like for podcasters, it's everything. Like you have to do so much as a podcaster, whether you're writing your show notes, your social posts, recording the audio, maybe you do a video podcast as well. And you've mentioned that one of your favorite words is consistent. So staying consistent across all of those, while podcasters are also trying to get it all done in time, is difficult because maybe they have that character when they're recording their episodes, but then all of their show notes or their social posts these days are written by AI. Do you think this is a big problem? Like if they're not staying consistent across the board, with that sort of character and those things that you mentioned that other people would say about you?
I don't think, to be fair and honest, I do use AI for things in my own business, like writing show notes and creating content if I need to. But I always want to remind you that usually you need to go back and just check that and make sure it is in your voice. It does match the tone of the piece that you're creating. And that it has the cadence that you have and like the human rhythm. So it doesn't take long to edit what AI gives you. And I would encourage you that those 2-3 minutes that you're going to spend on that are going to be very, very valuable. I do think that being consistent in your message, in your voice, in the mood people have when they interact with your stuff, I think that's really, really important. It helps to build that trust and that reliability, and it plays these kind of subconscious roles in them being able to say, oh, she always follows through on her word. I know I can expect this from her.
Yeah, just giving that extra little bit of time to go into it. I mean, it's the same for me. Like I do use AI for certain things. Like for example, the way I write show notes is after the podcast finished, I'll just open up Google Docs, I'll turn on the voice typing and then just say what happened in the podcast. So that's completely in my voice. But then for little bits like 140 word excerpt for my WordPress website, rather than sort of tweaking all of it and getting it all in, I'd just say to ChatGPT, can you summarize this in 140 words? But then even that, I'll still go in and have a look. And it's like, would I say this sentence? Or does it sound like something an AI has written?
Yeah, exactly. And there are simple little, maybe you pick your battles, right? Like maybe one thing I would say is, to your point earlier of the grammatical little pieces that AI likes to stick in, like make sure you're the kind of person that uses emojis, right? Make sure you're the kind of person, most of us don't use M dashes. AI loves M dashes. So just those kind of little tiny things. It takes 2 minutes to go through and clean those kind of things up.
Yeah, I know. The M- thing, I see a lot of people talking about this on LinkedIn at the moment, saying, I use M- all the time, and it's not an AI sort of tell. And that's fair enough for some people, because some people do. But there's no other reason why all of a sudden in the last 12 months, like twice as many posts I see have M- in. And for anyone who's not aware of what they are, they're like dashes, but they're long. They connect to the two words either side of them, and they're not on most keyboards. So it's just one of the things that ChatGPT loves to stick in absolutely everything.
Yeah. I'm like, no, where he puts M dashes, I'm typically like, okay, that's a parentheses for me, and like it's a funny parentheses, like it's something I want to actually make an aside to people. So just looking at those kind of things, I think goes a long way. And like I said, like making sure you're the kind of person that uses emojis, and even the choice of emojis. Like it likes certain ones. It loves the rocket and the fire. And, so choosing those kind of things. I tell you what, it seems like minutia, but it really does all make a difference. And especially in today's day and age, as language is changing, as our attention span is changing, and as, our need or desire, I guess, to produce more.
Yeah. And you really don't want to blend in, like you say, if everyone's using these same emojis and same ways of speaking. Like all the podcasts that I've seen and the podcasts that we work on, the ones that do well are the ones that do feel really personal and like it's got the host's character in. And then often when we work with a bigger company, they're kind of afraid to put any character in, or they feel like for branding, it's a good idea for the author of the podcast to just be the company name. So we almost always recommend, like, if you've got someone that you can assign as the host, even if you have to change them in the future or whatever, just, put their face around in the podcast content, put their name if you can as the author, just so it's, it doesn't just blend in with the rest of, or come across as really kind of dry and corporate.
If NPR can associate people like, Garrison Keillor with their podcast, and then he can go ahead and retire, we can do that, as small businesses and companies.
Yeah, for sure. And just thinking, moving on a little bit to like using our content, repurposing and creating content, and also because we've spoken about AI, I know there's a big sort of, don't know if it's pressure. I mean, maybe people put the pressure on themselves, or just how difficult it is to stand out at the moment. There's kind of pressure on repurposing content, making 12 clips from every podcast and cutting out little tweets and things like that. Do you think it's essential that people repurpose content? And do you see it being a problem as well with AI, podcasters like using AI to cut out clips and to, repurpose their content?
Oh my gosh, this is a huge one. Okay. So first, when I love repurposing, and I've been talking about it for years but I always want us to come back to why we're doing it in the first place. So I have like a couple of reasons, not just for you as the creator, because it's great for you. It saves you a lot of time and money and headache and having to think of what you're doing next. But I also love it for your audience's perspective. So to paint the case, I really love that it brings together, like, for example, if I'm talking about a topic on my podcast, I want to keep on talking about that topic all week long in all of my other content. So I'll do it in my email, I'll do it on my LinkedIn, I'll do it on my social posts. I keep the topic the same. And A, it gives me guardrails because I have like shiny object syndrome half the time. But B, it also just brings this like cohesion to my content. And it also gives people a chance to engage in the conversation in so many different ways. So not everybody is going to listen to your podcast. And if they do, they may not always listen to the whole thing. Some people, it's like, have you ever seen a message and you've seen it like 100 times and then one day it just hits you as like some epiphany? You're like, oh my gosh, but you have seen it again and again.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. Like sometimes I just think that it's important to meet people where they're at, and we don't know all the time exactly where they're at. So I like to offer them as many inroads as I can. So that's why I see so much value in repurposing. I don't want it to be where it becomes like this repurposing is now the entirety of my job and it takes up all of my time. So I do like using AI for repurposing. But I would, again, I would caution us to just go back and make sure things are like edited in our own voice. And I want to talk about this clips thing and also hear your perspective on it. How many clips... I would say this, how many clips, how many pieces of repurposed content can I realistically share? So meaning I see people who they'll send me like 30 clips. And I'm just like, first of all, I can't listen to all 30 of these to like choose which one I'm going to be resharing. And I also can't share all 30. And I would guess that they're not sharing all 30 for all of their guests. So I think less is more when it comes to like being intentional and choosing clips that have more impact and like really are engaging and bring people in versus just having all of these clips. And some of them are not, like some of them are very odd choices for clips. And so I wonder if like there's an AI element of that pulling it out. I don't know. But that would be my caution, is like make sure repurposing is not meant to be unintentional. It's not just like, great, now I have something I can copy, paste, rinse, and repeat. You still want to be really intentional with what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah, I love that. And I totally agree. Like the intentionality, I think the quality is far more important than the quantity. Because I've sort of audited podcasts for other people before and just having a look at a few of their shorts, and I don't know what's really going on. Even though maybe I'm not the ideal listener, but even like from the ideal listener's lens or the ideal viewer, you're watching it in 30 seconds into the short, you still don't really know what they're talking about, because to the person who made the clip, they do, because they were part of the full conversation. And then, with the AI things, like if we record a sort of 40-minute conversation or whatever, not literally every sentence is going to be valuable to who I know is in my audience, and probably the same for you as well. And I think with the AI tools, it just cuts things that work as a sentence, but it doesn't really know your ideal listener. So like the 30 shorts, maybe it's best just to even just share 3, but that are perfectly tailored to your audience.
And one other thing on this, I would just encourage us also to think of repurposing in a different way. So for example, I used to have a podcast that I ran for 5 years. And right now I'm in the process of going back and listening to some of the interviews that I know I also had like thoughts and opinions on, or I'll go back and listen to some of the solo episodes. And now that I have a set of listeners, I'm actually going to repurpose those concepts into my current podcast. So think bigger when it comes to repurposing. Is not just copy and pasting. It's not just taking big pieces of content, breaking it down into smaller. It's also repurposing your messages in different ways. So like not everybody learns the same. So sometimes I'll try to think of like, okay, what's another way I can approach the same top, but like from a totally different angle? Like what's a more logical angle? What's a more heart-centered angle? What's a more fun angle? So I kind of try to like think about it like that too. And again, I don't want it to be more complicated. I want it to be easier, but sometimes repurposing can actually just be like a really great way to get more ideas. Like if you have one topic and you're like, have you ever sat down and done a podcast and you're like, oh, I didn't say everything I wanted to say. Great. Now you have another podcast you can do saying more of the things that you want to say about that exact same topic. So I think of like repurposing as just like, I have a really cohesive message and it all goes together and builds on each other, and like ideas kind of, merge and blend and weave together. That's how I like to think of it.
Yeah, nice. And like even if you're talking about the same topic multiple times, I think some podcasters can be sort of worried that, well, they've already covered this topic, but half your audience or more probably haven't seen it, or they just sort of need more of it. Like a lot of podcasters I've seen, they'll, find a topic that their audience that always gets more downloads because their audience is really like, if it's about sort of making more money, that's often a big one for people. And it doesn't mean they're never going to, just because they've done a podcast episode on that topic, they're never going to revisit it. Like people want to hear about it. So just keep talking about it in different ways. That really makes sense.
I have so many people, like when it comes to social media, or, oh, we already did a blog on that, or we already did a social media post on that. I'm like, I know. And we can do another one because the people who are on your list now are different from the people who were on your list then. So we're allowed to say the same thing. Again, that's called, it's not repetition. It's cohesion, it brings our message together.
Yeah. Nice. And also, I was listening to one of your episodes about brand voice. Is that just one part of putting character into your content, or is that sort of the main thing, the way that we're speaking to audience?
Yeah, that is a huge topic because voice is kind of hard to break down and explain for people. But I will say it is a piece of all of our content. Like, so my voice is basically the mood that I inspire in a person on the other side. It's kind of like the tone I say things. It's the speed I say things. It's the specific vocabulary and wording choices that I use. Like that all kind of makes up my voice. Now, probably a lot of that is influenced by my personality, by my experiences in life, right? By my friends, by my family, by where I grew up. Like a lot of those, oh my gosh, I heard the best. I cannot remember his name, but he was a etymologist and he used the word ideology. Like we all have our own ideology, which means we all speak our entirely own language. He said there is no universe language. There is all just kind of like your own unique way of speaking. So it's like, it's that. It is the voice of you. And it probably has a lot to do with your personality, has a lot to do with your character, but it is kind of hard to like isolate which is which. Does that make sense? Yeah,
I know what you mean. And it's in some ways it sounds simple because it's a lot about just talking in, like you say, your own voice. But I don't want to just say to, podcasters, just speak in your own voice because it's easier said than done. And some people think they have to sort of put on a voice or say certain things, or they're sort of uncomfortable speaking in the way they would at home. Do you have any advice for anyone who wants to lean into their voice more or create more character, put more character in their content and is struggling?
Okay, here's a good place. I love the person you just described because I can feel it and I'm like, okay, come talk to me and I'll help you figure out what your voice is. But my advice to you to get started for yourself is I want you to think about the feeling you want to inspire in your listeners on the other side. Like, do you want them to feel empowered to take action to do it on their own? Do you want them to feel like you're an expert and you're the professional and like you have all the answers? Do you want them to feel like you're a friend and somebody that they can come talk to and share like what's going on? Like, so think about how you want your listeners to feel. I'll give you a personal example. When I do my podcast specifically, I want to invite people into I want them to feel like they're just sitting down and having a cup of coffee with me. Like I want it to feel like a conversation. People will respond to me. Like they will live tweet me. I'm using that expression as a joke, but they'll send me Instagram messages that are like, oh, I just heard this part and I'm responding to this sentence. And I want it to feel that way. So you have to answer that question for yourself. But how do I want people to feel on the other side? And then start to listen to the way you use your voice. So some of us use our voice in a melodic kind of way. It's sort of musical in nature. Some of us are very direct, and we use a lot of periods, and we make a lot of bold statements that we want people to remember. We want it to stick. So thinking about how that plays into how you want people to feel, it's huge. It's that's half the battle. And there's so much more in depth in this because it does come down to word choices and we don't want to talk over people's heads, right? But using everyday language is going to be my number one choice for you. Although I can see if you have a very educated audience, you might need to use some other words to make sure that they know that you're the expert, right? So it really comes down to who your listeners are and making that connection with yourself and saying, how do I want these people to feel?
Yeah, it reminds me of a podcast that we're working on at the moment, which will be launched by the time this episode comes out, called Plant Connection. And it's about sort of finding peace and reconnecting with nature, deepening your connection. And the host, Lisa, she is a little bit maybe slower to read the story because of the way that the podcast is supposed to be presented. And we will make sure that long gaps between sort of sentences and stuff are left in because you want the audience to feel that way and feel at peace and centered. And whereas in other podcasts, we would be cutting all those gaps out I guess that's kind of an example.
Exactly. Like some people will want to have you feel relaxed and at peace, and some people will want you to feel high energy and motivated and inspired and excited or, joyful. So it's all about, I really think it comes down to how you want people to see you and feel on the other side.
So that sounds like the main question that people need to ask. How do I want my ideal listener to feel? Are there any other kind of questions or exercises that people should do if they want to start thinking about this?
I think just going back to those ask your friends, ask your partner, ask your family members, like, what are 5 adjectives you would say describe me? And then maybe you should ask yourself first, and then you can ask those outside people and kind of see where the correlations are. And I bet you a lot of their answers will surprise you. But when you put all those together, that's kind of like you probably have like 200 adjectives that could describe you, but that's a big piece of who you really are, like who you are in yourself and also how you show up into the world. So I would encourage you to try that activity because it can be eye-opening and frightening.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. I feel like that, like, even once people have done some of these exercises, there might just be like that final sort of mindset shift that some people need to make, where it's almost like they need permission that it's okay to be themselves and talk in their voice on a podcast. If maybe then they, haven't been comfortable with putting themselves out there before. Is that something you find with people where it's simply just their mindset?
Yeah, some of it is being comfortable expressing things in your own voice. And let me just say one thing as well. I think it can also be uncomfortable when you're growing and when you're changing, so that's been some of, I think, the most uncomfortable times in my business, when I'm like, I'm getting to the next level. And now I'm kind of like, for example, if I am doing a speaking event, it's not that I change my voice, but it's just a little bit elevated in like how I'm presenting myself. And so I think that's important to remember too, that sometimes that's a little bit uncomfortable, but that's good. Like that's where you're putting yourself in the next kind of, you're moving ahead in your trajectory.
Thank you. And this last half an hour or so has gone really quickly, and I could ask you loads more questions about this because it's getting me thinking as well. But I just want to touch on your podcast, Content with Character. And also you said you had another podcast before. How did you sort of get into podcasting? Because I know a lot of people got into podcasting sort of around COVID time. It sounds like maybe you started podcasting a little bit earlier than that. And why did you choose to start a podcast?
Well, since I was a little kid, I always liked like walking around with like a tape recorder and like recording conversations and things like that.
Yeah.
But in 2008, I worked for a boss who had me as a co-host, and I was totally just there to be like the peanut gallery and play stupid. And it was very fun. And I got addicted then. So it then took me 10 years to start one of my own. But I listened to Serial. I don't know if you remember that podcast, but that was back in 2016, I think. So I listened to Serial. And once I heard that, I was like, I want to do an interview podcast. So my first podcast was I would interview like women business owners. This was kind of like before there were tons of podcasts doing the exact same thing. I would interview women business owners, and it all kind of played into this community I had built and events I did and a membership I ran and things like that. So I would like highlight these women business owners. As I closed my membership, and so I shifted into this because my voice, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with interview podcasts. When I was doing them, I kind of hid who I was and what I was doing as a copywriter behind my guests. So I would give them the spotlight so often, which is great. But I never really told people what I was doing. And a lot of people, as a result, did not know what I was doing. So that was my original goal of starting my podcast. It's just like, I need one for my business too. And then I realized that it was a little much doing two. And the other one wasn't really related to what I was doing anymore. So my official answer is when I was a kid. No, my non-official answer is when I was a kid. My official answer is 2018.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And is that when you learnt about sort of the setup? Was there a lot to, or was that part of your job originally? You already had those skills, like about microphones and all that? Because your audio quality on your podcast and now is very good. And yeah,
thank you.
A lot of podcasters haven't sort of twigged how to set that up yet.
I'm like the person that will get the information and then think that she doesn't know the information yet. So I took a podcasting course twice, actually. And I was telling you in the green room, again, that's where I learned to use Audacity and things like that. But I started out in a studio and I had somebody like producing my episodes for me.
Oh, nice.
I would record in the studio. It was nice because it was like in person. The sound was incredible. And then during COVID is actually when I moved to my, like doing it at my house, and I had to figure all that stuff out on my own. But because I had been already doing it for 2 years, like watching somebody else do it, it was a lot easier of a learning curve for me. I'll say that.
Was there anything, just sort of rounding out, was there anything any mistakes that you made early on that if you'd started now, you wouldn't make those again?
This is a good one. You'll appreciate it. I think I was so uncomfortable on camera that I would not let my guest, I didn't care if they did, but I would keep my camera off.
Oh, okay.
And so we would like have these conversations on Zencaster that were like just our voices. And it really, like looking back, which I'm now comfortable on camera, but looking back, I realized that was doing a huge disservice to like me, my listeners, my guests, because it was hard to read each other's facial expressions and body language, you know?
Yeah, no, I completely get that. Like watching some of my old videos, I'm talking really quietly and stuff, but I think now that it's becoming more of a norm to have a podcast and to put content out there, hopefully people are less nervous about that now, or more inclined to show their face.
Yeah. And one other thing that I think would help your listeners is I didn't know at the beginning to advocate so strongly for my podcast and for my listeners. So I said yes to a lot of guests that like actually didn't end up being a great conversation. A lot of times it was just a sales pitch. A lot of times it was fluffy and not really any value. And I wish what I had known then was just how important it is for me to advocate for my show, because I'm actually advocating for my listener. I'm actually giving them better value when I do a better job filtering people through.
Yeah. It's not just a case of putting content out there. It's, putting the right content out there.
Yeah. And I wish I learned that from day one, because I could have had a way better show from the beginning.
Well, luckily for the listeners, they can learn this from wherever they are in their podcasting journey. But if anyone wants to know more about what Emily's doing and learn more about how to put character in your content, you can find Content with Character. I'm presuming it's on all major podcast apps.
Yes.
Cool. And
yes, thank you.
And a lot of them are like 20 minutes or some are 15 minutes long, so you can just sort of dip in and give it a try. And seeing if you can get some more insight, because I'm sure we could have gone on for much longer. There's been so much useful stuff here. Is there anywhere else you want to send people or ask people to do who are listening?
I always think it makes sense to go listen to a podcast because you're already listening to one. So come over to Content with Character, be part of the world and see if it's for you. And then you can stick around as long as you like.
Awesome. Thanks again, Emily.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks for listening to Podcasting Amplified. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review on your favourite podcast platform. We'll be back next time with another conversation offering more insights to take your podcast to the next level and help you to achieve success. Happy podcasting.